the way that I speak to people, the way that I challenge them, in my tone and inflection, my humor, all those things are an integral part of like authentic representation of what I stand for. And the more I dove into that and leaned into that, even on my social media accounts, the more I had success and the more I had people more or less rally to me.
What's going on, Samson Strength Coach Collective listeners? On today's episode, we have Estevan Lucero. He's a co-owner of Transcend in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it. Been a long time supporter of your brand. I even got the merch.
We actually have the exact same.
Look
we got the exact same shirt on right now.
We shop at the same store. We shop at the same store, me and you.
That's exactly it. I think we just like wearing, clothes from quality companies. That's for sure.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, I'm stoked to have you on. Andy's been talking about having you on the show for a little bit now, and then obviously got to do a little pre-show research and found out some really cool stuff about you and your gym. I'm very excited to. No, all good, all positive.
Okay, hang on.
Yeah, we're not going to pull up some old Facebook post from 2010.
MySpace,
the
MySpace post.
The MySpace. Yeah, I'm asking about who your top 5 was. I'm just excited to get to know you a little bit further and kind of go through your experience. So can you just talk about your experience, everything that you've done within strength and conditioning, and then what you're currently up to?
Okay. Yeah, definitely. It starts with birth. No, I'm going to go that far back.
That's a great intro.
Yeah, I'm going to go that far back. Don't worry. So I've been doing strength conditioning in the Albuquerque area for, I moved back in 2013. So 13 years. And then, and that's my formal experience. And then of course, before that, I was helping some of my collegiate buddies do their preparation, all that kind of stuff. So to give you a little bit of an idea as far as my athletic background, because I walk the same path with a lot of the people I work with, played football here in Albuquerque, wrestled, all that kind of stuff, earned a scholarship to New Mexico Military Institute. Shout out in Nemi. Love that place. You guys know it because of Diego Pavia. He actually won a national championship down there. Let's go. And then finished up my 4-year degree at Fort Lewis College. Played football over there for the Skyhawks. Love to see they're doing awesome things over there. They just actually renovated their weight room, so I'm stoked about that personally. And aside from that, my undergrad is in sports psychology and in normal psych. We had a dual major, which is pretty neat. And then went on to get my master's degree in sports administration and marketing. So that's my classic education, I guess if you will. As far as playing career goes and how that stemmed into strength conditioning, I got out of college and I just recognized, okay, I have this psychology degree. Like, what am I going to do? Become a shrink? Like, what do I do with these tools that I have? Like this random assortment of skills. And I thought, okay, well, I know football, and that's kind of been my bread and butter. I've been doing that for probably the lion's share of my life. And I seem to understand people well enough, and showed up on the doorstep of my high school. And I talked to some coaches that actually had coached me and thought, hey, why don't I give this a shot? I'll go back to coaching. And it just so happens they needed some special ed teachers. So before I even got into this profession with both feet, I was a special ed teacher for 4 years. So I taught kids with all kinds of diagnoses, kids with developmental delays of all kinds, social, emotional delays, you name it. The whole gamut. Kids with Dubois syndrome, autism, kids with Down syndrome, and then some of the other, a little bit more radical ones, we'll say schizophrenia. I think it's called dissociative disorder nowadays, based on the DSM-4. And so nonetheless, I taught special ed, and the one grounding tool that I had while I was in the classroom was just really, really diving into the understanding of people, right? With kids that I was working with, it took tremendous amount of patience in certain situations, and you had to see them first before you could start correcting them or even giving them assignments, things like that. You had to really make sure that they felt known and loved and taken care of, and you appreciate the fact that they were even there. I mean, a lot of these kids come from very rigorous and torturous backgrounds in some cases, and if you didn't build a relationship with them, like, good luck getting them to do anything. So that was part of my experience that bled into strength conditioning. And then, of course, the football side of things. So I coached football for 3 years at my alma mater, Valley High School. And we were really successful one year, and then we were putrid the next two. So, as you know, when you have really good kids, you turn into a really good coach. And when you're lacking for some degree of talent, turns out you're awful. You're not any good at any of
Of
this.
course. Yeah, of
Um,
course.
so, nonetheless, it, when I was coaching, what I started to recognize pretty early on, because I actually still played, I did a small stint playing some arena football. I started to dive into performance a little bit more. So we had just a new facility to open up here in Albuquerque that was centric around performance. And not just like anything that you could have read in muscle and fitness. It wasn't anything you could see in muscular development. I started to get into the layers deeper than like back and bis, chest and tris, which I had already kind of known of. One of my main inspirations was like Jim Wendler and Chad Wesley Smith. He was really, really influential when I was just coming up, because they were the ones who were putting out good information. And then when I started being coached myself and diving more so into performance, I discovered unilateral training, and all of a sudden I got way better. I discovered how to integrate plyometrics more effectively. I understood energy system development a little bit more so. And again, in the arena football setting, you're not necessarily coached in the way you were in high school or even in college. Your schedule isn't dictated to you. Like, the onus is really on you when it comes to your development. And I just knew I had to get better. Like, the game itself was played at a pretty high level. Outside of that, we're not going to talk about the behind the curtain of that experience, but nonetheless, again, I trained at this performance facility and had my eyes open to a lot of incredible nuance. And over the course of time, I just recognized, what? The thing that had made me a decent football player wasn't my stature. Like, I'm 6 feet tall on my best day when I wake up in the morning, right? With That's what so I tell everybody on my resume. And I wouldn't even say that I'm the most explosive or fast guy, but what allowed me to play at a pretty high level was my durability, my endurance, my resilience. And then, of course, when I was able to sharpen up some of the other skills and buckets that I hadn't filled, I got a whole lot better. And I just thought, this is a really neat thing to investigate. Like, I had the strength thing figured out. I was one of those guys who's really strong, but not real fast or twitchy. And now that I had that baseline, when I had that baseline, it was easy for me to acquire a lot of the other skills that I needed. And so once I kind of put the pieces together and said, I really enjoy this stuff, I started with just internships. So it was kind of a whirlwind. I was coaching, I was teaching, and doing internships all back to back and all in the same day. So first, when I was getting started, I definitely had to earn my pay or lack thereof, because I was working, 7 to 7 a lot of nights, but I loved it. I didn't have any real world responsibilities other than like a car payment and rent and things like that. No real stakeholders other than me. And it went full fledged in the S&C thing. I did 2 internships back to back, and decided at some point, okay, I want to make a run at this thing. I didn't know if I wanted to do it collegiately, and I knew the private sector would be a challenge, but I figured I could do it. So I had 2 pathways that I could take. And I think, things work out the way it's supposed to. They're supposed to, right? I actually was going to intern with University of New Mexico, and it just so happened that they had recruited and signed one of the players that I coached in high school. Shout out Teton Saltis. And they closed the door on me because at the time the NCAA would frown upon something like that. If basically they sign one of your guys and then they bring you in, it's like, well, how did that work? And I couldn't do my internship at UNM, and it ended up being one of the best things for me, because it forced the envelope, and I dove into the private sector. So I started out at a small facility, still teaching simultaneously, and I just figured, okay, in my mind, I just did the math. If I'm gonna really make a go at this, I need to make as much money as I was teaching. My mom was freaked out because I'm foregoing like a pension and the stable job and summers off and semi-easy work days. And I'm basically saying I'm going to cut my parachute and go for it. And so back to back teaching and then coaching until I got to a place where my book of business was strong enough. And that took a lot of work. It was a lot of networking and being around the community and talking to coaches, getting exposure to athletes, starting with the infancy of social media. So really get my name out there to some degree. And it wasn't like what it is now. We're talking 13 years ago. And it just continued to snowball from there. So once I got my feet wet, and accrued plenty of clients. I helped with mentorship and internship processes. Um, I went to or helped build out another facility, and that's where I kind of encountered your guys' brand. I helped my buddy Lawrence open the Performance Ranch up here in Albuquerque, and shout out to Lawrence. He's a great guy, still a good friend. And he was one of my original mentors. He was the one who kind of brought me along and helped me in my development. He got me exposure to a lot of the UFC fighters because at the time, and probably still now, Albuquerque is a big fight town. So I spent a lot of time with Donald Cerrone and a lot of those guys that were in that scene, and got exposure to once again energy system development, get a little more well-rounded, acquire a few more tools, help Lawrence get going with the Performance Ranch. And then I became the performance director thereafter at a place called the Field House here in Albuquerque, which is this massive 70,000 square foot facility with volleyball, baseball, basketball now, and a whole variety of athletes. We took care of about 500 athletes on a weekly basis in and out. All the data collection. I started building a staff as a performance director. Use my administrative skills, I guess you could call them, and even leadership skills that I'd acquired playing sports to help get that going. And there was a point in time where in the private industry, there really is no, what I want to say, linear pathway, linear career trajectory. It's like, okay, well, you got to figure it out and figure out the next steps. It's not like there's this corporate job that's waiting just above you, and when that guy vacates, you can just take it. And so I got to this place where I'm like, okay, well, the things that I understand, the things I know about business, alongside the following that I had amassed, I'm going to make a run at this thing. So me and my partner started up Transcend, coming up on 2 years, so 2 years in October, and we've it's hard for me to quantify the success and happiness it brings with the amount of traction we've garnered in the community. I've been really, really pleased with the outpouring of athletes and parents and coaches who have just given us a warm reception, and the kids that have entrusted us with their development. It's been really, really cool to see. And we went from probably closing, I guess I would say December of 24, about 100 members. We did import a softball club that I have a former relationship with. They're called the Sun Cats, and they're phenomenal. I always have to shout out those guys because they were great. So we worked with all their teams, but about 100 organic clientele, and now we're about 320 organic athletes and adults sitting inside the facility, plus another, I believe, 6 or 7 high schools that we work with. I'm the head strength conditioning coach at La Cueva High School. We work with Hope Christian. We work with Highland. We work with Mesa. We work with Volcano Vista. And we work with Capitol High School. And then we have a couple in and out, Real Grand Soccer. So it's been really, really cool to see. So long story short, it wasn't a very short story. Yeah, that's my upbringing, man.
No, it's just such a cool story to me, and it's very cool to hear about your career trajectory. This is a little bit of a selfish question, and the listeners are going to roll their eyes because I've mentioned this a million times. And I always sound like kind of a snob when I say this, right? But my master's degree is in sports psych. Okay. So hearing that you got your undergrad in sports psych is really intriguing to me. You mentioned kind of understanding the people first aspect of it, right? With that background of understanding, you have to show them that you care. You have to develop this relationship, then you can get so much more out of it. What other things has having a degree in sports psych helped you with by being a coach?
Oh man, I think it served as the basis for all of my coaching, for being totally honest. As much as you and I and every strength coach out there appreciates the X's and O's, they don't mean a damn thing to anybody you're working with unless you have the ability to connect. Like I've known some guys, when we go to like the NSCA conventions and their name tags are like down to the floor, and yet they struggle with people. They struggle with the conversation. They struggle with the volley back and forth of just like active listening. And again, I think it has served as the foundation for any of the coaching I've done, and I've just gotten better at it over time. Just really making it a point to let the athletes know, whether it be using personal examples or listening to them and what they're going through, to make sure that we solidify or paint them a picture of how we're going to work together through this process of getting better. I think it's crucial. I can't say enough about every one of my coaches when we get started. We always intern them, and during that internship process, they do 2 things for us. With regard to sports psychology, right out of the gate, they do a big 5 personality assessment by Jordan Peterson. So it's 5 personality strata, and then they're broken down into 2 individual quadrants. So I get to know them first and foremost. I wanted to see what makes them tick and what kind of person they are. Are they neurotic? Are they empathetic? Are they orderly? Um, are they are they naturally creative? Any of those kind of things. So that way, when we get them situated, we can set them in the right seat on the bus and utilize them to their strengths. Instead of trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And then aside from that, we get into week over week. We go over Brett Bartholomew's the art of coaching. Not just the art of coaching, but conscious coaching. So we read his book chapter by chapter. We get a hold of the athlete archetypes, and one of our assignments is like, okay, you're going to come with me to La Cueva High School. You're going to start to identify which athletes fit which archetype and which ones are a blend, and how are you going to connect with them. And some do really well, some flounder, but you know what, we coach them up and we hire them on board. They're the right people for the job. After enough, again, scrutinization and vetting, we feel like we put together a polished product. And again, that stands on a foundation of understanding people first and foremost.
I really like where you took that too, with not even just saying just with the athletes, right? But as a business owner, you have a lot of people who you employ and have to work with on a regular basis. And so you have to know how to work with them as well too. That's where the sports psych can really come in handy.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a hard set belief that anybody that we bring into our culture inside of the gym, one, they have to be able to communicate with the other parts of the other members of the staff. That's first and foremost. In fact, our staff has vetoed interns that we actually liked because, behind the scenes, those interns weren't as glamorous to the other members of the staff. And I think that's really, really important. We're very much about protecting that culture. And then ultimately, we want to hire people with high character. So if you come into our business, I need to know that if I leave the room, you're going to be able to communicate with kids. You're going to be able to communicate with their parents. You're going to be able to speak with their coaches, and in a timely fashion, an organized way, in a compassionate way, in a thoughtful way, and in a responsible way. And also be willing to have hard conversations, but conversations that are necessary with both parents, coaches, athletes. That often are challenging for a lot of people. So yeah, we really, really lean hard into making sure that our folks are well acquainted with obviously the sports science and everything that underpins the actual service, but just as well acquainted with the understanding of people.
1,000%. I mean, it's a people business at the end of the day. We can't forget that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned, I actually know somebody who's a very good friend of mine, who would be one of those people with, like you said, an SCA. He's got the entire tags down to the floor.
Oh my God.
And but he's one of the smartest people I've ever met. And self-admittedly, he and I interned together and coached together for a while. And then he eventually at one point just said, look, I got to go straight online. Like I got to just do online programming, cause I'm just not very good at the in-person aspect of it. And so, ultimately it is a skill that you have to have. It's a skill that you have to continue to develop. And I love the fact that you're focusing on protecting the culture of your gym too, which kind of leads me to my next question. Cause I'm curious about this, right? I think a lot of coaches want to know what goes into developing a business. You've been running this gym for 2 years. You're a co-owner of Transcend. Obviously, like you said, you've shown a lot of success in growing your client base already, but what's gone into building this business? Kind of take me through day one to now year 2.
Oh, geez. It's a consistent evolution, and it's hard to know where to start because there's so many integral parts of it. There are so many underpinnings that people don't recognize when they're getting into business. I think everybody out of the gate starts in this industry with passion, right? Everybody that I've ever met who wanted to be a strength coach is excited about getting better or helping people, which is noble in and of itself, right? And then it's very altruistic. However, you got to put food on the table. That's what it comes back to. You got to be able to you can have the best of intentions, but if you don't have some degree of systems and processes in order to do everything from lead generation to capture those leads, to retain them and limit churn, then you're just going to be floundering and consistently, scraping your plate to find the next person. So for us, I think when we got started, we had a good foundation in that I was an administrator before. I already knew and this again comes back to I wholly attribute this to playing sports. I was a team captain on just about every team that I was on, and in that experience, it allowed me to understand the mentorship role that I had, and to always know that you're supposed to be the person who puts their best foot forward, and you're the person that you need to show up on a consistent basis. And it doesn't matter at what level of the hierarchy you're in, whether you're even when I was at NIMI. It doesn't matter if you're a private, it doesn't matter if you're a squad leader, it doesn't matter if you're a team leader, it doesn't matter if you're the actual, the original middle commander, the guy who's running the show. Like, you're always putting your best foot forward. And I think it starts with me and my partner, Adrian. We have to be the guys who are grinding day in, day out, because I mean, I'm only 37. There are guys who have much more tenure in this industry. For all intents and purposes, we're still a fledgling business. Um, but just setting the foundation and saying, okay, we need to be the ones who spearhead building out of systems and processes to make sure that we continue our success. And again, going back to like my responsibilities as administrator, it was kind of nice because when I was the performance director prior, I was able to start experimenting with marketing techniques and small group training and pricing strategies and marketing campaigns, you name it. So I could kind of play with those things with a little bit of my sandbox. Now, what's nice is in this instance, I guess the handcuffs are off, right? In that I don't have to really ask anybody to make a decision as far as like what we're going to do next. And so that's very freeing. That's nice. But also, again, as the guy wearing the hat and the one in the chair, when something goes wrong, like I got to go look at myself in the mirror and go, who's responsible for this? And it's you. Like, that's right. um, so going back to the build out of the business, when we got started, we sat down, organized our pricing model, what the market could bear first and foremost, based on some of our prior experience, what was going to be the strategy and the niche that we were going to develop to leverage inside of our community to create attraction for adults and athletes alike. And then beyond that, we started to build out the back end, like what do our systems and processes look like for retention? How are we going to keep these people engaged and always have something for them to look forward to? And showcasing a progress, because I think that's a big part of the development side of things is you don't want to go back to the gym day after day and just feel like you're showing up for a workout. Like you want to have something to shoot for. And I think we really nailed that down on the youth athletic development side of things. We're part of the Universal Speed Rating. My partner is actually one of the regional directors for the Universal Speed Rating through Les Spellman. They're actually going to be going out to the USR Speed Summit here in September. And that has been such a useful tool in that those guys have put together an entire database where we can showcase to athletes where they stand relative to the other athletes that both we have tested and have been tested nationwide when it comes to speed, change direction, power output, broad jump, vertical jump, any of those things, any of those core metrics. And at the basis of, or at the beginning of any client's introductory to us, they start with a consult. We get to know them, again, building that relationship first and foremost. I want to see their areas of need. We use what we call like the closer strategy, clarify why they're here. We label exactly what that is, where they want to work on speed, change direction, power, you name it. And they don't always vocalize it in the same terms that we might, but we want to meet them where they're at. And then we overview some of their past experience and past pain. So things that they're running into, is this kid not making the varsity roster or even the C team roster, or is he riding the pine? Why is that? Where is he going wrong? Where are we missing there? And then from there, we provide solutions. And at some point we level the sale. So here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to go X, Y, and Z. I'm going to help you with your speed. I'm going to help you with your power. I'm going to help you with nutrition. We're going to talk about recovery incessantly. And then from there, we explain any objections they might have. So, it's always price, it's budget. Those are price, budget, and scheduling. So we help them through those processes, and sometimes we help get out ahead of those things by showcasing our listing of classes. Which we have a variety of times we offer to athletes that kind of fit every schedule, but we also do small group and semi-private, or small group and private training. So even if you're really in a gym, we can still get a coach with you in a smaller setting and make it work for you. And then after that, we reinforce the decision-making by, again, making sure they see results. And then we have several goodies that we give them right out of the gate to make sure that they feel really good about this decision and make them feel like they're really on the team and part of something. Aside from, any of that stuff in the intro process, we're constantly checking in. I have a staff member on the team that's solely dedicated to client retention, where they're checking in after the first day. We're sending birthday cards. We're sending welcome cards. She's calling to make sure that their first day was great. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And our guarantee as a brand is to improve speed by 1 mile an hour in the first 90 days at the very minimum, and improve a vertical jump by at least 3 inches in the first 90 days. And that's kind of our shared agreement between us and the athletes and the parents, is saying, if you show up day one, we're going to make sure that, you see results so long as you're here at least twice a week. And we're really adamant about making sure that they check in, and we keep attendance logs and things like that. So they got to be with us at least twice a week, bare minimum. And at the very end of that at the very end of that, what we see is if we nail it in the first 90 days, and I borrowed this from one of our mentors, Graham, then they stay with us and they turn into their length of engagement extends quite a bit. But again, it's really all part of the whole process of making sure not only are they getting started with us on the right foot, but also making sure that we keep them engaged in a variety of ways. And the same can be said for a lot of our adults too. Like when they walk in the door, the process is a little bit different in that they come in for a consult, and we do very similar processes when it comes to sales, as far as identifying, their past experience and things like that. But a lot of our adults have different goals and different aspirations. So we want to make sure that we clarify those things and get those out in the open air. And then we come up with a mutual agreement as to like what those quantifiable measurables they want, they want to spearhead are. And then we basically turn it into a ledger or a file that we keep on each one of them. And we do 30-day check-ins with them. All right, where are you relative to your weight loss goal? Where are you relative to your health goals? Have you gotten your blood work done? Or are you seeing anybody outside of this to help with your PT? And are we collaborating with those guys, because I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm an expert in every single field. And that's one way that we keep them entrenched in our business as well. So I don't know if that's a good enough answer.
No, it's a great answer. Seriously. And I mean, I think it just goes to show just how much goes into running a business. Like, I think a lot of people can, and especially, within the collegiate sector, I think it's very easy to kind of look at your friends and say, hey, why don't we just open up a business, right? Why don't we open up our own gym? And it's kind of fun to think about. It's fun to imagine what it could be. But then obviously hearing your full breakdown, it's not quite as easy as they think, where it's just training clients, right? So how many employees do you have total?
So right now, if I'm remembering correctly, we have a couple part-timers, so I want to make sure I include them too. But we have 9 coaches on staff currently. And started with probably 4 of us, 4 that were really gung-ho and down for the cause. But yeah, we've grown substantially, probably looking to hire a couple more. We're looking at expansion here pretty soon because we're in a space right now where it's just getting a little bit tight.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the best problem to have, right?
It can be, but it also comes with more. Another piece of the business is the consistent, continuous evolution is knowing that as you grow, there will be other challenges that arise, and how do you get out ahead of those things and foresee them, and so that way they don't become too big of hurdles.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm curious about the challenges too. Were there any unexpected challenges that you faced when you were starting the business, going into year 2? Anything that popped up that because obviously you had a lot of experience within the private sector already. You had a lot of clients. You kind of knew about a lot of those different processes, but this is the first time starting your own gym. Were there any challenges that you didn't expect to see that popped up?
Well, I think the biggest challenge that I personally have run into, and I've tried to stay out ahead of it as much as I possibly can, is recognizing, my growth as a coach is transition from being I don't want to say just a coach because that's not a good way of framing it, but from being a coach and somebody who's constantly on the floor to being an administrator and a mentor and being capable of seeing things from a 30,000-foot view. I'm in a position right now where I have the luxury of both being able to work with the clients that I really enjoy and also taking a step back so I can work on other things that the business requires. And I think that's crucial. Any coach that I've ever worked with who really loves the game prides being on the floor. They want to be entrenched in everything the athlete does. They want to keep all the data. They want to make sure they're showcasing results. They want to do the best job they possibly can. But as you continue in this journey, you start to recognize, okay, well, where is my time going to be best spent? And not that it isn't best spent on the gym floor, but it's also going to be helping groom other coaches. So you're not always the guy at the end of the day who has to be there from 7 to 7. And I think a lot of coaches will burn out that way because they don't have any internal systems and processes or ability to even take off some hats that they're wearing. That's one thing that we've done is making sure that, all right, as we've gone along, we've created SOP manuals for every single coach and every single position that we have. So every coach knows exactly what's expected of them. We do a weekly check-in, a one-on-one with each of them. And that's really, really important because a lot of times coaches, in our industry, if they're not checked on or maintained, then they start to feel like they're just kind of drifting, and they feel aimless. Okay, well, let's sit down with every single coach and make sure we're all still working in the same direction. All right, what are the pain points you're running into? Are there conflicts in your schedule? Like we have some coaches who are in school now, and so we got to make sure that we're accommodating to them and we're not burning those guys out. We have a coach who's responsible for our social media, and he does a damn good job, better than I ever could. My my archaic social media posts by comparison look like, I don't know, like AI made them or something. I don't know. Not even close. AI could do a whole lot better job than me. But the guy that we have responsible for it, we got to make sure that he has all the resources, tools he needs, whether it be paying for subscriptions, helping him get a camera, any of that stuff. So again, starting to remove yourself to some degree, not all the way. I think it's really important that I still coach and that I'm still very much hands-on with several of the a lot of the clients I work with, but also make sure that I have a presence inside the business and make sure that they can put a face to a name whenever a parent walks in or kid walks in. So giving high fives and all that kind of stuff and shaking hands, kissing babies, doing all that stuff. But then being able to step away and take time to say, okay, where do I need to spend my attention to both increase our value or create more revenue? What are some opportunities that I'm able to chase? Things like that. And I think, again, that's an area that certainly has presented some degree of challenge. And even thinking about work-life balance.
Yeah, I think that ties back to our earlier point that we mentioned, which is some coaches may be really smart, maybe good at the programming side of things or the science side of things, and they may struggle with, actually developing those relationships. And then if you take it a step further, some coaches may be really good on the floor. They may be a really good coach, but do they have the skills or do they have the mindset to actually be able to run a business? As you mentioned, it's not just is your time best spent on the floor. It's ultimately, I have almost double-digit employees. I have a business partner. There's a lot of responsibility with my position. What is the best way I can spend my time to make sure that there's success within this business as well too? So I think it's just very interesting to me, and I really appreciate you giving us the insights into what this really looks like from a running a business perspective. You mentioned it at the end with work-life balance. Like, that's my main question for you is, you're the head strength coach of a high school, you run a business, you obviously have a lot going on. How do you maintain work-life balance?
I've come to terms with the fact that it's not necessarily a work-life balance. It's more of a blend. I think it was Brett Bartholomew who said that. And I felt like that was right on the money. It is totally a work-life blend. I have a wife, I have a daughter. And I think that for me, it's become an ebb and flow of knowing when to push really hard. Like summer, for instance, is our real busy season. Like there's no doubt about it. We're jamming. It is wall to wall. And that's just what it is. That might not be the time for vacation. That might not be the time to go on a siesta. That's the time where I'm grinding, like nose to the grindstone. Let's go. And I got to be all hands on deck. I got to help where I can and anybody who needs it. And conversely, so even on a day-to-day basis, okay, knowing when I can step away. Like I journal on a pretty consistent basis and just talking about things that make me content. And one of them is just as simple as sitting on my porch and reading a book and just being at peace, like totally calm. And I think that to me is my work-life blend or my work-life balance is like knowing when I need to pull some punches because I've been pushing it hard. And I think that if you can create that degree of space for yourself and you can take 5 minutes here and there, sometimes it's a car nap, like, hey, I just need to step out of this place for just a second, close my eyes, just breathe for a little bit. I think that's what it turns into. And then, of course, designating, like going out of your way to designate time to spend time with family, making sure that you're still invested in the people around you, because those are the ones that are going to keep you going, like long after the business and long after, any of the things that I'm doing right now go away. What are you going to be left with? And I want to make sure that I'm still using this time wisely to spend it with the people that I care about. It even extends to like my animals. I have 3 dogs, making sure that I'm here and I'm enjoying those moments. Taking my kiddo to school. So arranging my schedule so I can do those things. I think those are invaluable, and you just have to know, again, when to pull punches and when to pull back and say, all right, this is time where I'm not going to think about business at all, even though it might always be in the background, like this peripheral noise, but take a second just to breathe, like ground yourself. I think that goes a long way, and that's helped me along.
Yeah, I think, the best piece of advice I ever got was one of my mentors was an older coach, and he said, you need to pick a marker when you come home.
Mhm.
that, once you pass this on your driveway or wherever it may be, you're going to ultimately put those things aside, right? Like
Mhm.
whatever it may be from the workday, and obviously working in basketball, there's going to be nights where we get home 10 p.m. because we've got a later game that night. But you said
Mhm.
when you're home and you're trying to spend time with your family, and I have 3 dogs as well too, so no
Mhm.
kids yet, hopefully soon, but trying to be intentional with my time with them. Ultimately, there was a tree that I would always see when I drive home, and I'd say, okay, kind of try to flip the switch and be 100% present at that time with my family. And then, when I go back out, or if there's certain time that I have the next day where I might not physically be at work, but it's time to focus on work, it made it easier for me to actually have a physical marker of seeing something that said, okay, now's my time to switch into Connor Agnew, the husband, versus Connor Agnew, the strength coach. So it seems, that you have to learn that skill as well too. And I can only imagine the pressures that come with it, with actually owning a business, because like you said, at the end of the day, a lot of the responsibility is on your shoulders.
100%. It sounds like you have a totem. It sounds like what's that movie Inception, where you just get
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know what I'm
that's
talking about,
true.
where he gets the
Yeah,
top out and spins it.
yep, that's
Um,
exactly true.
yeah, having a good grounding mechanism goes a long way for me. When I get in the door, my phone on the charger, and I try not to look at that thing but once or twice before I go to bed. Same thing, I try to sleep with it outside of my room. Things like that allow me to pull myself away from any external noise. Um, yeah, and I think it's really important. Like I said, it's a blend in a whole variety of ways. It's also making sure that the people that I care about, my family, namely, they're also vested in the business. They're part of it. They feel like this is part of an experience they share. Um, and so, yeah, I think that any coach who's getting into this needs to recognize, like, when you're in your 20s, early 30s, and maybe even the position that I'm in to some degree, see what you're made of, show up, because I was just making this point to the kids, like, we are all going to go through external stressors in life, point blank period. You're always going to be stressed out. And you'll never be less busy than you already are. In fact, I expect my life to get a whole lot more busy at some level. But what you become is you become more efficient. And the game's not over just because you're having a bad day. You need to get back on the horse and, like, show up for the people who are showing up for you. Like, I got plenty of things on my plate, even right now, that I'm like, oh man, the cross that I'm bearing feels pretty damn heavy. I'm like, so, like, who cares? You're like, buck up a little bit. You're fine. Like, you show up, and nobody's going to feel sorry for you either. And the worst thing to happen is you feel sorry for yourself.
Yeah. Well, you actually asked for that, right?
Yeah,
At
this
one
is what
point
we
you
asked
said,
for.
I want this, and
Yeah,
so again, you can't forget that.
here it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. 100%. Well, I'm curious about this too, and I've been told this advice from multiple business owners before, is that if you go into business with somebody, you need to make sure it's somebody you're very, very comfortable with. And it's almost more important choosing a good business partner than choosing a good wife, which you have both. So I
Yeah.
might see if that advice holds true. How do you choose a business partner? What goes into that? And how do you find somebody you're comfortable actually starting a business with?
So I think it comes from an understanding of complementary skills, right? One of the skills that I seem to have is my ability to communicate and my ability to build relationships. And you know, I would feel like I would say that my strong suit is definitely the sales portion of what we do, the marketing, the outward strategy, and that sort of thing. My partner, on the other hand, and even he would probably agree to he would agree to this, is even through his Big Five personality assessment, he's very agreeable in nature. He's very calm. And he's very intelligent as well, and he's responsible for a lot of our churn. So he's the one I go catch the fish, and we make sure that they're well prepared and they're taken care of when they're inside of the business. And so we have that kind of back and forth strategy. We both handle the sales. Um, we spearhead the sales together, but again, outward reaching, marketing, collective vision when it comes to the way that the business is seen from the outside looking in. And that's all me for the most part. And of course, we collaborate back and forth. Conversely, so when they're inside of the business, he's making sure that, all right, if a kid has been with us for 90 days, are they getting the reports? Are they being checked on? He's checking on to make sure that all of the birthday cards are mailed out. He's making sure that our retention is real buttoned up, and he's got a heavy task. Like, he's responsible for keeping our churn, underneath 5%. And that's not always easy to do, especially with the seasonality of our business. And so, yeah, I think collectively we had to just make a decision. Okay. And this is something we uncovered early on is I know that he's a hard worker. So maybe I should rewind it a little bit. That was my prerequisite. I was like, you better be willing to fucking grind. Sorry, I mean, cursed.
No, that's
Sorry, I'm
fine.
getting all strength coach around here. Yeah, you better be willing to grind. And I knew he was down for the cause. Adrian's a wrestler. He comes from that background. He's probably a more decorated athlete than I've ever been. And yeah, so he was up for the challenge. And okay, well, we got that aside. We both have this kind of blue collar mentality. Well, then what are you going to do really well that maximizes your strengths? And what am I going to do really well? And let's try not to step on each other's toes. And just like in any relationship, we definitely have our conversations behind closed doors with that are open-ended and honest, and being okay with having somebody in the room that can have those conversations with you. Because I think where a lot of partnerships flop is they avoid those conversations at all costs. And yeah, there have been some areas where I've definitely fallen short, and I know that he would say the same. But being able to be transparent and say, okay, I think I need you to fix this. And it's not because I don't like you. It's not because I don't think you're a good person. This is not a personal attack or a character attack. These are just things that are non-negotiables. We've had those conversations before on both sides. And I think we've both been pretty good about finding good resolutions and staying on course together.
Yeah, those are the people who want to see you do the best, right? Those are the ones who can not take things personally and then give the same feedback to you. And ultimately, those are the relationships that have the most success. So I'm glad to hear that, and I'm certainly going to keep that in mind if I do start a business one day. I've got one person in mind, but I'm not going to name him just in case he turns out different on me. So
Yeah.
you mentioned a little bit of advice for younger coaches, which was ultimately embracing the grind a little bit, finding a time where you should just put your head down and work. Is there any other advice that you'd like to impart to younger coaches or any coaches who might be listening to this podcast?
So I think my advice, and this probably stems out to all coaches, but especially young coaches, is be your authentic self. Be who you are. I'll give it a little bit of a personal experience. So when I was doing my internships, I was in a gym that was very what do I want to say, sterile, for lack of a better term. Very, very nose up, high profile clientele, folks with a lot of affluence, things like that. And shoot, I was a much less soft version of myself right now. I had just come out of college athletics. I was so used to being in the locker room with boys, and yeah, I was definitely a little rough around the edges and a little challenging. And my tone is coarse, and I don't always use the perfect language in every setting. I wasn't as good at reading the room. And what ended up happening is as I was interning, I I was actually reprimanded a couple of times, where I had a conversation behind closed doors, like, "Hey, man, you got to be really careful with your tone around certain people." And I'm like, "Hey, I was just giving Jeff a hard time. Like, I'm shooting the shit with him. I didn't think it was that big a deal." But again, that ruffled some feathers, and I had to be real conscious of that. And it turned me into somebody that I didn't even feel like I knew. I had a hard time looking people in the eye at one point because I was so worried about stepping on eggshells. It was, uh, I was riddled with anxiety. Just worried that I was going to rub somebody the wrong way, and then that was going to be how they cut me loose. And that continued on through, I don't know, probably all the way into my first coaching gig, where I was like turned into this buttoned up professional, which obviously we still are. There's still, you should always be that at all times, but you should still be able to articulate your authentic self in some way. And over the course of years, I was able to, again, spread my wings and do things my own way and go on a path of self-discovery and recognize that the person that people gravitated toward was me. The way that I speak to people, the way that I challenge them, um, in my tone and inflection, my humor, all those things are an integral part of like authentic representation of what I stand for. And the more I dove into that and leaned into that, even on my social media accounts, the more I had success and the more I had people more or less rally to me. So uh, what I'm not saying is go in there guns blazing as a first time coach and, piss everybody off. I'm not saying that by any means. But if you're the person who, again, has maybe leadership capabilities. Okay, don't be afraid to step forward just a little bit. Don't be afraid to be the person who volunteers for a project. Don't be afraid to be the person who says, "Okay, I'm going to get that done, and I'm going to accomplish that because it's going to make your life easier." Like act as a servant leader first and foremost, but do it in your own way. Like this whole life experience it's your canvas. You paint it however you want. And I think one of the reasons for our success at Transcend is like, when I was working as the performance director, yeah, there were some barriers and parameters that I had to stay inside. There was definitely some guardrails. And now, shit, we have a gym that the walls are painted black. Our colors are black and white, and we have these edgy logos and stuff like that. And it's more of a representation of who I am, who my partner is. And I think people lean into that because they're like, hey, this is cool. This is neat. This is, in some cases, nostalgic, or maybe this is novel. I think that's one of the reasons people like being around us in a lot of ways, is because we are who we say we are. It's not a false representation of who we think people want us to see.
I love that advice of being authentic, because I had a similar experience in my own internships. And correct me if I'm wrong, like my own experience, how it had happened with me is I tried to change who I was, and I tried to change it for so long that I almost became convinced that that's who I actually was. Right.
Yeah.
And then eventually it took a couple of my friends to kind of snap me out of it. And then I found a lot more love and joy in coaching, and it was actually pretty similar experience to yours, where, people kind of told me I needed to tone down who I was. And then I almost became convinced I was like this low confidence person. And then finally I got out of that rut, and it really helped me understand that that's not who I am. It's not who I want to be. And coaching can actually be fun. I don't have to just fit this mold that other people see. Did you have a similar experience to that?
Oh, very much so. Very, very much so. For me, it was just, again, it was reflective in nature, where, I would leave the facility feeling somewhat frustrated, or even a little bit out of sorts, disheveled, downtrodden, upset. And I didn't really understand where that void was coming from, because I always felt like I was a pretty confident person. And yeah, it probably took years to unravel that to some degree, and break out of that shell just a little bit. And I think one of my saving graces has been I've been involved with the coaching community at large. Like right now, I'm involved with the coaches over at La Cueva, and that's a high school course I do the performance coaching at. And just having a community of friends, guys that are like-minded, going through similar struggles, and being able to just kind of kick my feet back and be one of the boys and like let loose just a little bit and not feel like so buttoned up, that put me back in touch with who I was.
Yeah, 100%. That's your totem right there.
Yep.
Would be it would
Yeah.
be the other group you can hang out with. Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Well, Coach, thank you so much. Seriously, it's been great to get to know you. I really appreciate getting to understand the ins and outs of business, again, because I do feel like a lot of my friends and myself have had false notions about what it really is like to run a business, where it feels like it might end up being something where it's just a few things you have to take care of. And clearly, we learned in this episode that is not the case. It's a lot of different things, but it can be
Yep.
a very rewarding process to undertake. I'm just curious, if somebody wants to kind of follow along with your journey, reach out to you, see more about Transcend, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah. So you can follow me on my personal account. It's Coach Stev. Like I said, I don't know if I said this before, maybe at the beginning of the podcast, but Estevan's really hard to say for a lot of people. So Coach Stev is how I'm known. And then, of course, you can follow our Instagram account. For our athletes, it's Transcend NM for Instagram. That's where we feature most of our content. At Facebook as well. And then on the adult side of things, it's called the Forever Athlete. So Forever, I think it's _athlete. Because we do coach a ton of ex-athletes of all kinds, adults who are just looking to get back on the horse and challenge themselves. So you can follow both of our profiles. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can always email me, estevan@transcend.com, or reach out to my social.
That's perfect. Well, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for your time, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. And again, I want to say thank you to the brand. You guys have been phenomenal every step of the way. I love every piece of equipment you guys make. And I'm looking forward to your guys' success too.
Well, I appreciate that. And seriously, I always say this, but it makes it very easy for me to be a podcast host for a company I actually believe in. So
Yeah.
it's always very cool to hear about the positive feedback. So thank you.
Good.